I'm a 28-year-old woman recently engaged to my boyfriend of 7 years, Liam, who's 30. He proposed during a surprise beach trip, and it was everything I'd ever dreamed of. A sunset, the sound of waves, and Liam down on one knee with the most beautiful ring I'd ever seen. It was perfect, and I was over the moon. However, if you knew my family, you'd know nothing in my life can ever stay uncomplicated. My younger sister, Emma, who's 26, has always been the center of attention. She's the golden child of the family, and my parents have always coddled her, no matter what. If she messed up, they had excuses ready. If I succeeded, they found a way to downplay it in comparison to her. Emma thrives on this dynamic, and it's been like this for as long as I can remember. When I called to share the news of my engagement, my mom was thrilled, well, for about 2 seconds. Then she asked if Emma knew yet. My dad chimed in to remind me not to make Emma feel left out, which was bizarre because this was my engagement, not some group activity. It was a red flag, but I let it slide. To celebrate the engagement, my parents suggested a family vacation to a resort by the beach. They said it would be a chance for everyone to relax and connect. Liam was hesitant, but I convinced him it'd be fine. After all, I thought, what's the worst that could happen? Emma arrived late, as always, sauntering in like she was the guest of honor. She looked annoyed the entire time. At first, I thought it was the heat, but her mood became obvious during dinner. She made snide comments about the size of my ring, comparing it to the one her fiancé, Jason, gave her. Liam really went minimalist, huh? She said, laughing. Jason looked uncomfortable, but nobody said anything. It was classic Emma. She'd always find a way to ruin the moment without being outright confrontational. The next day, we decided to take some family photos by the water. My mom wanted a picture of me and Emma together, holding hands, and I reluctantly agreed. Emma grabbed my hand and made a show of admiring the ring. "You sure this won't fall off? It's so light, it might just float away," she joked. I forced a smile, but I could feel Liam tense up next to me. Then it happened. Emma held my hand a little too tightly, and before I could react, she flung my ring into the ocean. It was so quick I barely processed it. One moment she was holding my hand, the next she was gasping dramatically and saying, "Oh no." It slipped. She didn't even try to hide the smirk on her face. Everyone froze. My mom was the first to speak, scolding me for reacting so dramatically. My dad suggested it was an accident. Liam and I were already in the water, frantically searching, but the waves made it impossible to see anything. After what felt like an eternity, we gave up. The ring was gone. Emma's apology was the cherry on top. "I'm so sorry," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "I didn't mean for it to happen. Maybe you shouldn't wear something so loose next time." My parents, instead of holding her accountable, told me I should let it go, because rings can be replaced. Liam was livid and wanted us to leave immediately. I was furious too, but I wasn't ready to let Emma win. Leaving would mean she got away with it, and I was tired of being the one to back down. That evening, while everyone else was pretending nothing had happened, I pulled Emma aside to confront her. She rolled her eyes and accused me of overreacting. "You're always so sensitive," she said. "It's not my fault you can't take a joke." Jason, Emma's fiancé, overheard part of our conversation. He looked genuinely shocked when I told him what she'd done. "She didn't mean it," he said weakly, but his expression said otherwise. I could tell he was starting to see a side of Emma he hadn't before. The rest of the trip was tense. My parents kept trying to guilt-trip me into forgiving Emma, saying things like, "She's under a lot of stress planning her wedding, and family is more important than a piece of jewelry." Liam stayed by my side, encouraging me to stand my ground. By the end of the trip, I knew this wasn't something I could just brush off. Emma had gone too far, and my parents' constant enabling had only made her worse. It was time for her to face the consequences of her actions. For once, I wasn't going to let her ruin another important moment in my life without fighting back. As we packed to leave, I decided I was done being the bigger person. Emma wasn't going to get away with this, not this time. If she wanted to play games, I'd show her I could play too. Update 1. After the disastrous family vacation, I couldn't stop thinking about what Emma had done. Every time I tried to move past it, her smug face, her sarcastic apology, and my parents' excuses replayed in my mind. Liam reminded me that Emma wasn't untouchable, and he was right. If she wanted to play games, I was finally ready to play back. The first step was gathering information. Emma had always been good at presenting herself as perfect to those who didn't know her well, but I knew better. I started by quietly going through her social media accounts, paying closer attention than I usually would. On her Instagram, I noticed some cryptic comments under her pictures from a guy I didn't recognize. The comments weren't outright flirtatious, but they were definitely more personal than anything Jason would write. I clicked on his profile and found out he worked at the same company as Emma. Liam, always my partner in crime, encouraged me to dig deeper. He suggested that if Emma had no problem being reckless in front of family, there was no telling what she might be hiding elsewhere. It didn't take long before I found more breadcrumbs. A mutual acquaintance had tagged Emma in a story from months ago. In the video, she was dancing at a work event with the same coworker. Jason wasn't there, and Emma was acting way too comfortable with this guy. I saved the video, just in case. It was around this time that Jason called me. I wasn't expecting it, but he said he wanted to clear the air about what happened on the beach. He admitted he'd been uncomfortable with how Emma behaved but felt stuck because her parents always sided with her. Then he dropped a bombshell. He had been second-guessing their relationship for months. Emma's temper and selfishness had started to wear on him, but he felt too deep into the engagement to back out. That conversation solidified my resolve. Emma had done this to herself, but her parents had only made it worse by enabling her. I remembered how she had sabotaged her ex-boyfriend in college, spreading rumors about him just because he broke up with her. That wasn't the only time she'd hurt someone for her own amusement. It was a pattern, and I was finally going to stop it. The next time I visited my parents, I called them out on their behavior. I pointed out how they always defended Emma, no matter what she did. They dismissed me, calling me jealous and accusing me of blowing things out of proportion. My mom even tried to guilt me by saying I was tearing the family apart. I left that day knowing they weren't going to change, but I wasn't doing this for them. I was doing it to make sure Emma faced the consequences of her actions. One night, I reached out to Emma's former best friend from high school, someone she'd cut off years ago after an argument. I was surprised when she was eager to talk. She shared stories about how Emma had manipulated her and others, often lying to get her way. Then she mentioned something shocking. Emma had been texting someone she worked with, a wealthy coworker who she'd hinted was interested in her. That was all the confirmation I needed. I wasn't going to accuse Emma of cheating without proof, so I started planning. I brought up the coworker casually during a family dinner, making it sound like I'd heard about him through someone else. Emma didn't deny knowing him, but she looked annoyed and brushed it off. Her reaction was enough to plant seeds of doubt in Jason, who was sitting at the table. Later, I noticed him watching her more closely. Meanwhile, Emma kept up her smug act, treating me like I was irrelevant. At one point, she cornered me and smirked, saying she'd always be the favorite, no matter what I did. It only made me more determined to expose her. Jason's suspicion grew as Emma's excuses became less believable. She started canceling plans with him and staying late at work more often. He confided in me again, saying something didn't feel right. That same night, I finally got the evidence I needed. Emma's former friend had screenshots of Emma texting her coworker about sneaking out together and how Jason would never know. She sent them to me and I felt a mix of anger and satisfaction. Emma had set herself up for this, and now there was no way out. When I showed Liam the messages, he agreed it was time to act. I wasn't going to confront Emma directly. That would just give her the chance to twist things in her favor. Instead, I decided to let Jason see the truth for himself. Emma had ruined one of the happiest moments of my life, and now she was about to face the consequences of her own choices. Update 2. Jason's birthday dinner was held at a small, upscale restaurant that Emma had insisted on booking herself. She loved being the center of attention and had gone all out with decorations, a cake, and a guest list that included mutual friends and family. It was the perfect setting for what I had planned. Liam and I arrived early, taking our seats at the far end of the table, where we had a clear view of everything. I brought a plain manila folder with me, tucked discreetly into my bag. Emma was in her element, practically glued to Jason's side. She laughed loudly, touched his arm every chance she got, and made sure everyone noticed how in love they were. Jason played along, but I could see the cracks in his facade. He wasn't as responsive as usual, and his forced smiles hinted at the doubts he'd shared with me. The dinner progressed smoothly at first. Everyone chatted and enjoyed the food, and Emma made sure to steer every conversation back to herself. When the main course was served, Emma stood up to give a toast. She praised Jason, calling him her rock and the love of her life. She even teared up a little, earning a round of applause from the guests. It was classic Emma, putting on a performance to maintain her perfect image. I waited until the dessert was served. The timing had to be right. As the cake was being sliced and distributed, I pulled out the folder and walked over to Jason. I placed it in front of him without saying a word. Emma noticed immediately and froze, her eyes darting between me and the folder. Jason opened it, flipping through the screenshots of her messages with the coworker. His face turned pale as he realized what he was looking at. The table fell silent. Jason pushed back his chair and stood up, holding the folder in his hand. He looked directly at Emma and asked her if it was true. Emma stammered, her confident facade crumbling. She tried to grab the folder, but Jason stepped back, holding it out of her reach. That's when the guests started whispering among themselves, trying to piece together what was happening. Jason's voice was steady as he told everyone that Emma had been texting another man, sneaking around behind his back. He read out one of the messages where Emma had written about how she deserved better, and how her coworker was more exciting than Jason. The room erupted in murmurs of shock and disbelief. Emma, clearly panicked, tried to deny everything. She claimed the messages were fake and accused me of trying to sabotage her relationship out of jealousy. Her voice grew louder and more desperate, but nobody seemed to believe her. Jason looked at her with a mixture of anger and disappointment. Then, without another word, he announced that the engagement was over and walked out of the restaurant, taking the folder with him. The aftermath was chaos. Emma broke down in tears, accusing me of ruining her life. She yelled about how I had always been out to get her, and how this was just another attempt to steal the spotlight. My parents, of course, rushed to her side, comforting her and glaring at me like I was the villain. They demanded to know why I had done something so cruel. I calmly reminded them that Emma had brought this on herself. Word spread quickly after the dinner. By the next day, Jason had updated his social media status to single, and mutual friends started reaching out to me for the full story. I kept it brief, only confirming that Jason had discovered Emma's infidelity. Most people sided with Jason, expressing disbelief at Emma's behavior. Some even mentioned how they'd noticed red flags in her personality before, but hadn't wanted to say anything. Emma tried to spin the story, posting vague status updates about betrayal and family turning against her, but her attempts to gain sympathy fell flat. People knew the truth now, and no one was buying her version of events. Liam, ever supportive, reminded me that standing up to Emma was the right thing to do. For the first time, I felt like I had control over the situation instead of letting her dictate everything. My parents, predictably, begged me to apologize. They insisted that I had gone too far, and that Emma was suffering because of me. I refused. Emma wasn't the victim here, and I wasn't about to pretend otherwise. Surprisingly, several extended family members reached out to me privately, expressing their support. They admitted they'd seen Emma's manipulative side over the years but had stayed quiet to avoid drama. Knowing I wasn't alone in this gave me a sense of validation. In the days that followed, Emma became increasingly isolated. Jason blocked her on all platforms, mutual friends stopped responding to her messages, and even her coworkers began distancing themselves. It was clear she was facing the consequences of her actions, and for once, nobody was coming to her rescue. I felt a strange sense of relief as I watched everything unfold. For years, Emma had gotten away with treating people terribly, and now she was finally being held accountable. Liam and I celebrated with a quiet night at home, knowing we'd done the right thing. Emma's reign as the golden child was crumbling. and I couldn't help but feel empowered by how far I'd come. Update 3. Emma's retaliation started almost immediately after Jason ended their engagement. She crafted an elaborate story, claiming I had fabricated the evidence to ruin her life out of jealousy. She told anyone who would listen that I'd been bitter about her being the favorite and had orchestrated the entire thing to destroy her happiness. It wasn't surprising, but it was infuriating to watch her double down instead of taking accountability. Some extended family members initially believed her version of events, especially those who had always been close to my parents. They called to ask why I was so determined to cause drama. Others, however, reached out to offer their support, saying they'd always suspected Emma wasn't as perfect as she pretended to be. The divide became more pronounced when Jason made a public statement. Jason posted on social media, thanking me for bringing the truth to light. He wrote about how toxic the relationship had been and confirmed that the screenshots were real. This was a huge blow to Emma's narrative. People who had been on the fence started backing off from her, and mutual friends began unfollowing her online. Emma, undeterred, ramped up her efforts. She posted vague, dramatic updates about betrayal and being stabbed in the back by family. The captions were accompanied by carefully curated selfies to elicit sympathy. While a few people left supportive comments, the majority called her out. One person even commented, "Maybe you should apologize instead of playing the victim." That one stayed up for a few minutes before Emma deleted it. Meanwhile, her workplace wasn't as forgiving. Word of her affair with her coworker started circulating, fueled by the screenshots Jason had shared with a close friend. Gossip spread like wildfire, and Emma's reputation at work took a major hit. I heard through a mutual contact that she'd been taken off a major project, and there were whispers about her being a distraction in the office. My parents, of course, came to Emma's defense. They called me several times, accusing me of tearing the family apart. They claimed I was being cruel and vindictive, insisting that Emma had suffered enough. When guilt-tripping didn't work, they switched to threats. My dad hinted at cutting me off financially, saying I'd regret alienating my family. That backfired spectacularly when I reminded them that I was financially independent and didn't need their support. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. As Emma's isolation grew, she became more desperate. Jason had blocked her, mutual friends were distancing themselves, and even her coworkers were keeping her at arm's length. It wasn't long before she showed up at my apartment. She pounded on the door until I opened it, then stormed inside, yelling accusations. She demanded an apology, claiming I'd ruined her life over a petty grudge. Liam, who was in the kitchen, stepped in immediately. He calmly but firmly told Emma to leave. When she refused, he physically escorted her out, locking the door behind her. The sound of her screaming in the hallway lingered for a while before she finally left. After that confrontation, I started reflecting on how deep the dysfunction in my family ran. Emma's behavior wasn't new, it was just the latest example of a pattern that had been in place for years. My parents had always prioritized Emma, no matter what she did, and I realized how much I'd internalized their favoritism over the years. It was a hard pill to swallow, but it also reinforced my decision to stand my ground. My parents weren't ready to let it go. They issued an ultimatum: reconcile with Emma or risk being excluded from future family events. I refused. I told them that Emma's actions were inexcusable, and that I wasn't going to apologize for exposing the truth. If they chose to exclude me, that was their decision, but I wouldn't be manipulated into pretending everything was fine. Liam, as always, was my rock through all of this. He reminded me that I didn't need their approval to be happy. To lift my spirits, he started planning a symbolic gesture to replace the engagement ring Emma had thrown into the ocean. He wouldn't tell me the details, but he promised it would be special. His support made all the difference, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was breaking free from the toxic dynamics of my family. To my surprise, an unexpected ally reached out, my aunt, my dad's sister. She'd always been distant from the family, and I'd never known why. She told me she'd experienced similar favoritism growing up and had distanced herself to protect her mental health. Her validation was a turning point for me. It reminded me that I wasn't alone and that standing up for myself was the right thing to do. Emma, meanwhile, continued to spiral. Her attempts to regain control over the narrative were failing, and the consequences of her actions were catching up to her. For once, she was being held accountable, and it was clear she didn't know how to handle it. As chaotic as everything had been, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. I wasn't just standing up to Emma, I was standing up for myself, and it felt long overdue. Update 4. A week after the fallout with Emma, I received a long message from her. It started with an apology, or at least what was supposed to look like one. She acknowledged that she might have made a mistake but quickly pivoted to blaming her actions on stress from work, wedding planning, and the constant pressure of living up to family expectations. She ended the message by saying she hoped I could find it in my heart to forgive her so we could move forward as sisters. The message was riddled with justifications and self-pity. There wasn't a single sentence taking full responsibility for what she'd done. I shared it with Liam, who read it silently before shaking his head. My close friends had similar reactions, pointing out how the message felt more like damage control than a genuine attempt to make amends. It was clear Emma was trying to patch things up for her own benefit, not because she truly regretted her actions. As expected, my parents got involved. They called me, urging me to accept Emma's apology. They framed it as a necessary step toward healing the family and restoring peace. I reminded them that Emma hadn't even apologized to Liam, who had been just as affected by her actions as I was. My mom brushed it off, saying Liam would understand because family comes first. I decided to respond to Emma, setting clear boundaries. I told her I would only consider reconciliation if she took full accountability for her actions and apologized in person to both me and Liam. I wasn't interested in a performative apology. I wanted her to truly own up to what she'd done. Emma's reaction was predictable. She called me unreasonable and accused me of trying to humiliate her. She claimed I was holding a grudge and making her jump through hoops for no reason. When I refused to back down, my parents escalated. They accused me of destroying the family dynamic and blamed me for Emma's ongoing distress. According to them, I was the reason Emma was struggling to get her life back on track. While my parents were busy defending Emma, Jason reached out to me again. He wanted to thank me for exposing the truth and shared that he was doing much better now. He'd started dating someone new, someone he described as kind and genuine, and he was finally feeling hopeful about the future. Hearing that gave me a sense of closure regarding the chaos Emma had caused in his life. Public perception of Emma continued to shift as her attempts to play the victim fell flat. Her social media posts became increasingly bitter and erratic, with vague jabs at family betrayal and fake friends. Mutual friends who had initially stayed neutral began distancing themselves from her, and some even reached out to me privately to show their support. Around this time, I started therapy. Years of familial favoritism and Emma's manipulative behavior had taken a toll on my self-esteem, and I wanted to address it. Therapy was eye-opening. It helped me understand how deeply ingrained the family dynamics were, and gave me the tools to set healthier boundaries moving forward. One evening, Liam surprised me with a private dinner at home. He brought out a small box and handed it to me with a smile. Inside was a new engagement ring, simple yet stunning. He told me it wasn't about replacing the one we lost, but about marking a fresh start for us. It was a small but meaningful gesture, and it reminded me of how lucky I was to have someone like him by my side. Meanwhile, Emma's life was unraveling further. Her affair with her coworker, which had initially caused whispers at her workplace, escalated into a full-blown scandal. I heard through a mutual contact that the coworker was married, and when his wife found out, she reported both Emma and her husband to their company's HR department. Emma faced disciplinary action, and her reputation at work took a severe hit. Even extended family members began stepping in. My aunt, who had been quietly supportive of me, confronted my parents about their enabling behavior. She told them they needed to stop making excuses for Emma and start holding her accountable. Other relatives echoed her sentiments, urging my parents to acknowledge how their favoritism had contributed to the situation. Despite the mounting pressure, my parents remained defensive. They started to question their approach but were unwilling to fully admit their role in enabling Emma's toxic behavior. It was frustrating, but it wasn't my battle to fight anymore. Emma, on the other hand, continued to sabotage herself. She burned bridges with extended family members who tried to help her, lashing out when they didn't take her side. Her isolation deepened, and it became clear she was struggling to navigate a world where her actions had real consequences. Through it all, I found clarity. I realized I didn't need my family's approval to be happy. My relationship with Liam and the support of my friends and chosen family were enough. I focused on building a life that prioritized my well-being and left the toxic dynamics of the past behind. Emma's apology, or lack thereof, had been a turning point, not because it fixed anything, but because it showed me how far I'd come. For the first time in years, I felt free. Update 5. After Emma's life began to unravel, I decided to take a step back from the chaos. My parents were still pushing for reconciliation, but I realized that staying in constant contact with them only dragged me into their toxic dynamic. I told them I needed space and started limiting our interactions to the occasional phone call or family event. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary for my peace of mind. Emma, meanwhile, hit what could only be described as rock bottom. Her coworker, the one she'd had the affair with, ended their relationship after his own life fell apart due to the workplace scandal. Emma lost her job shortly after, and with no steady income, she had to move back in with my parents. Instead of taking responsibility, she blamed everyone else: Jason, her coworker, her boss, and of course me. According to Emma, I was the root of all her problems. Not long after Emma moved back home, my parents reached out again, this time sounding more subdued. They said they wanted to mend things and admitted they might have made mistakes in how they handled the situation. The apology felt half-hearted, more like an attempt to restore family harmony than genuine remorse for their behavior. I thanked them for reaching out but kept my guard up. Years of favoritism and enabling couldn't be undone with a single conversation. Therapy continued to be a game-changer. One session, in particular, stood out. My therapist helped me unpack the guilt I'd carried for years about not being the perfect daughter. I realized that my parents and Emma's expectations were never my responsibility. Letting go of that guilt was liberating, and I finally felt like I could move forward without the weight of their approval hanging over me. Emma, still grasping at straws, made a last-ditch effort to reconnect with Jason. I found out through a mutual friend that she showed up at his workplace trying to talk to him. Jason, who had firmly moved on, refused to engage. He later sent me a message letting me know what happened and thanking me again for exposing the truth. He said it saved him from a lifetime of misery. Shortly after, he blocked Emma on all platforms, closing that chapter for good. With the drama slowly fading into the background, Liam and I focused on planning our wedding. We decided on a small, intimate ceremony with just our closest friends and supportive family members. My parents weren't invited, and while it wasn't an easy decision, it was the right one. I wanted our wedding day to be a celebration of love and positivity, free from the tension and toxicity that had overshadowed so many of my life's milestones. As the wedding date approached, the support from friends and extended family was overwhelming. My aunt, the one who had been quietly rooting for me, stepped up in a big way, helping with the planning and making sure I felt loved. It was a stark contrast to the silence I'd grown up with when Emma overshadowed everything. For the first time, I felt truly validated by the people around me. Emma, predictably, didn't take the exclusion well. She found out about a pre-wedding family gathering and showed up uninvited. She marched in, demanding to speak with me, but the relatives present weren't having it. One by one, they called her out for her behavior, listing all the ways she'd hurt not just me but others in the family over the years. Emma stormed out, furious, but the message was clear: her usual tactics weren't working anymore. My parents, visibly shaken by the confrontation, later told me they regretted how they'd handled things. They admitted they should have held Emma accountable sooner, but still stopped short of fully acknowledging the extent of their enabling. It was a small step forward, but I knew better than to expect a complete transformation. The wedding day itself was everything I could have hoped for. Surrounded by people who genuinely cared for us, Liam and I exchanged vows in a beautiful, stress-free ceremony. The absence of my parents and Emma wasn't a shadow over the day, it was a relief. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was starting a new chapter on my own terms. As for Emma, her decline continued. She alienated the few people still in her corner, lashing out whenever things didn't go her way. Extended family started pulling back, tired of her constant drama, and even my parents seemed to be reaching their limit. She burned bridge after bridge, leaving herself increasingly isolated. After the wedding, I decided to share my story on Reddit, partly as a way to process everything and partly to offer support to others dealing with similar family dynamics. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of people shared their own experiences, validating what I'd been through and cheering me on for standing up for myself. Among the comments was one from Jason, who congratulated Liam and me and thanked me again for helping him avoid a toxic marriage. Reading the comments and seeing how many people resonated with my story gave me a sense of closure. For so long, I'd felt alone in dealing with my family's dysfunction, but now I realized I wasn't. I wasn't just a victim of their behavior. I was someone who had taken control of her life and set boundaries to protect her happiness. Looking ahead, Liam and I are focused on building a life filled with love, mutual respect, and the kind of positivity I once thought was out of reach. Family doesn't have to be the one you're born into. It's the people who stand by you, support you, and celebrate your growth. And for the first time in years, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be.